Private Thomas Murphy is 22 years old. He writes poetry in a small leather notebook his sister gave him before he left Liverpool. He dreams of opening a bookshop when he returns home. At night, in the trenches near Ypres, he sleeps with his boots on, not because of enemy attacks, because of what comes after dark. The rats arrive at dusk. They're patient. Thomas doesn't know that in 4 months, one will gnaw through his cheek while he sleeps. He'll survive the war. The infection won't kill him, but he'll never open that bookshop. His fiancée will leave him when she sees his face. He'll drink himself to death in a London slum by 1923, age 29. The British War Office knew about the rats in 1915. They documented the problem in internal memos marked "Do Not Distribute." They never told the soldiers. They never told the families. For 60 years, those files stayed sealed. Before the trenches, the fields of Belgium were farmland. Wheat grew tall. Families worked the soil for generations. The rats that lived there were ordinary, field mice really, small, timid. They ate grain and avoided humans. Then came August 1914. 4 million men dug into the earth across a 400-mile front. They lived underground for 4 years. They ate, slept, defecated, and died in narrow channels carved through mud. The trenches became cities, cities without sanitation, without waste removal, without burial details that could keep pace with the dying. A single British trench system could house 12,000 men. Each man produced waste. Each man carried rations. Each man, statistically, had a 1 in 4 chance of dying there. The bodies didn't disappear. Artillery made the ground impossible to cross. Corpses lay in no man's land for months, sometimes years. The rats came to feed. Within 6 months, soldiers reported animals the size of small dogs. By 1916, official measurements recorded specimens 2 feet long, excluding the tail. They weighed up to 3 pounds, 10 times the size of a normal rat. Army veterinarians studied the corpses and found something disturbing. These rats were breeding 3 times faster than ordinary rats. The constant food supply had triggered accelerated reproduction. One female could produce 880 offspring per year. Military officials calculated that a single mile of British trenches contained 250,000 rats. Multiply that across 400 miles. Multiply that across 4 years. Do the math yourself. The official British Army Sanitation Manual, published in 1916, contains 1 sentence about rats. Rodent presence should be reported to company commanders. That's all. No instructions for control, no acknowledgement of scale, just report them. Private William Harrison reported them. He wrote in his diary, now housed in the Imperial War Museum, that the rats moved in packs like wolves. They learned to avoid traps within days. Poison killed hundreds, then stopped working. The survivors grew resistant. They evolved. Harrison described watching a rat drag a severed human hand across the duckboards at night. The hand still wore a wedding ring. He noted this without emotion in his entry dated March 3, 1917. By then, horror had become ordinary. The rats preferred the eyes first, soft tissue, easy to access. Sentries reported finding corpses with empty sockets by morning. The dead couldn't complain, but the rats didn't only feed on corpses. Dr. James Dunn, a battalion medical officer, documented 47 cases of rodent facial trauma in a single month at Passchendaele. Men sleeping in dugouts awoke to rats chewing their lips, noses, ears. The official diagnosis was trench fever or minor lacerations. The real cause never appeared in medical records sent to families. Sergeant Michael Brennan survived a rat attack that severed 3 fingers while he slept. His service record lists the injury as equipment malfunction. The pension board denied his claim. He received nothing. He died homeless in Dublin, 1931. The rats grew bold. They stopped fleeing when humans approached. Soldiers reported animals that would stand their ground, backs arched, teeth exposed. Lieutenant Edward Alfrey wrote that shooting them was useless. You kill one, 20 come to eat it. At night, the sounds were worst. Squeaking became a constant backdrop. Thousands of voices in the darkness, a frequency that prevented sleep. Men described it as drowning in noise. The scratching never stopped. Claws on wood, teeth on bone, movement in every shadow. Terriers were brought to the front lines in 1916, special rat-catching dogs. Each dog killed approximately 200 rats per day. The soldiers loved the dogs. They named them, fed them scraps, watched them work. The dogs lasted 3 weeks on average before the rats overwhelmed them. The rats changed the men in ways bullets couldn't. Corporal James Fraser developed a ritual. Every night before sleep, he placed his rifle bayonet beside his head, blade pointed outward. He slept on his back, hands folded across his chest like a corpse. He believed staying still made him less attractive to the rats. His letters home mentioned sleeping difficulties. He never mentioned why. He returned to Scotland in 1919. His wife found him 3 years later in their bedroom, positioned the same way, flat on his back, hands folded, a kitchen knife beside his pillow. He'd been dead 2 days. The doctor listed the cause as heart failure. The knife remained unexplained. The psychological damage had no name yet. Shell shock covered everything doctors didn't understand. But Captain W.H.R. Rivers, a British psychiatrist, documented something specific in his 1918 case notes. Soldiers who couldn't sleep in darkness, who insisted on lights burning all night, who woke screaming not about artillery, but about things crawling. One patient, name redacted in the files, clawed his own face bloody while sleeping. When Rivers asked why, the soldier said he was getting them off before they could bite deeper. There were no them. The war had ended 4 months earlier. The French called it folie de rat, rat madness. It wasn't an official diagnosis. It was what soldiers called each other when someone broke, when someone started talking to the rats, when someone stopped caring whether they lived or died because the rats would get them either way. Private André Moreau was shot by his own sergeant in February 1918. The official record states killed in action. The sergeant's confession, sealed until 1968, tells a different story. Moreau had been feeding the rats, saving his rations, leaving food in neat piles. When confronted, he said the rats deserved to eat too. He said they were just trying to survive like us. The sergeant shot him because Moreau had started petting them. The British War Office knew the full scope by late 1915. Internal memoranda, declassified in 1975, show explicit discussions about morale impact of rodent proliferation. One memo, dated November 12, 1915, states, "Publicizing the scale of the rat problem would serve no strategic purpose and may impact recruitment." They chose silence. American forces arrived in 1917 with no warning. The U.S. Army training manuals contained 0 references to rats. When doughboys entered the trenches, they were unprepared. Lieutenant Howard Cooper's first letter home described cats everywhere. His second letter, 3 weeks later, corrected himself. His third letter never mentioned them again. His mother kept all 3 letters. She donated them to the Smithsonian in 1964, along with a note. He never spoke of the war after he came home. Now I understand why. The rats outlasted the war. When the armistice came on November 11, 1918, the trenches emptied. 4 million men went home. The rats remained. French and Belgian farmers returning to their land found the animals had spread miles beyond the former front lines. They'd colonized entire villages, burrowed through abandoned buildings, nested in churches. It took 6 years to eradicate them. Poison gas, leftover chemical weapons from the war, was now used to kill what the soldiers had left behind. No government ever issued a public statement about the infestation. No official history mentioned the scale. Soldiers who spoke about it were dismissed as exaggerating. War stories, people said. Everyone embellishes. When the first scholarly books about World War I appeared in the 1920s, rats merited 1 or 2 sentences. Rodents were present in the trenches. That was all. The measurements, the mutations, the attacks, the psychological damage, none of it made the official record. The files stayed classified for 60 years. When they finally opened in 1975, most of the men who could have confirmed the accounts were dead. Thomas Murphy died in 1923. James Frazier in 1922. William Harrison in 1929, suicide. Andre Moreau in 1918, shot by his own sergeant for showing compassion to rats because the rats were the only living things that didn't want him dead. No officers faced questions about the cover-up. No officials explained why families weren't told. No one was disciplined for marking reports "do not distribute" while men slept with knives beside their heads. No one was ever held responsible. Thomas Murphy's notebook survived. His sister kept it after his death. The poetry stops abruptly on March 15, 1918. The final entries aren't poetry, they're lists. Counted 47 tonight, 52 the night before, 61 tonight. Stopped counting. The last page contains 1 sentence, written in handwriting that deteriorated from the careful script of the earlier poems. They know we're afraid. His fiancée never knew about the rats. She left him because of his face, because of the scars, because he flinched at shadows. She married someone else in 1920 and lived a long, happy life. She died in 1970 without knowing what had happened to him in those trenches. His sister never told her. The bookshop Thomas dreamed of opening never existed. The poetry he wrote was never published. His name appears on no memorials. He's buried in an unmarked grave in a London pauper's cemetery, one of thousands who came home from the war and died anyway, not from wounds, but from what the wounds couldn't explain. Your grandfather, if he served in those trenches, never told you this story. He couldn't. The words didn't exist yet for what he'd experienced. Shell shock was the only vocabulary the world gave him, and it wasn't enough. The rats grew to the size of cats because we gave them millions of bodies to feed on. They became predators because we created conditions where that was the only rational evolution. They outlasted the war because they adapted faster than we could kill them. We built the trenches. We stayed in them for 4 years. We created the horror. Then we buried the evidence and called the survivors liars. The rats didn't keep secrets. We did.